A silent, rainy night. A young woman puts on a uniform that doesn't belong to her. Holding her father's name badge, she walks into the city's most luxurious hospital, not to stand out, but to keep his job safe. But then, she was misunderstood, insulted, and thrown out of the very place she once dreamed of working in. No one knew she was a final-year medical student. No one knew she would be the one to save a critical patient's life. No one knew she would be the reason the entire prestigious hospital would be forced to look in the mirror. This is not a story about fame. This is a story about a name that was written wrong, and a person who walked into the one place they were always meant to be. You're listening to The Wrong Name on Her Badge, a story that touches the heart and reminds us never judge a person by the badge they wear on their chest. The afternoon rain fell over the city like a sorrowful soundtrack drumming against the glass rooftops of skyscrapers as if counting down the seconds. In a rundown boarding house tucked behind a bus stop, a young woman sat quietly at her desk. A dim yellow light cast its glow over her weary face, one marked not just by exhaustion, but by unwavering determination. Her name was Leah Morin, 23 years old, a final-year medical student. Thick binders of notes sprawled across the table, their edges smudged by the rain that had soaked her as she ran home from class. Each page marked another step toward her dream, becoming a doctor. Not for prestige, but because she knew too well the helplessness of watching someone you love fade without being able to save them. The silence shattered as her phone rang. The screen lit up. Dad. Ward. 3. Leah answered, already bracing herself. Sweetheart, I threw my back out. I can't make it to tonight's cleaning shift. They warned me last week. If I miss one more, they'll terminate the contract. Leah held her breath. Althena General Hospital, where her father worked. The night janitor shift wasn't just any hospital. It was a sanctuary for VIPs, politicians, famous artists, and CEOs of healthcare empires. The marble tiles gleamed like mirrors. Even the smallest misstep could cost a team their jobs. Did you ask anyone to cover for you? She asked. No one, he replied. They said substitutes need a staff ID badge. I'm sorry, honey. If you're studying, just stay home. Leah stood up. She looked around their damp little apartment. Her father's shoes were still wet from his morning shift. His uniform hung behind the door, slightly crumpled. She walked over and pulled the plastic badge that read, Carlos Morin, her eyes lingering on the picture of the salt and pepper-haired man with a gentle smile. I'll go, she said softly. I've been to the hospital with you countless times. I know your schedule. I know the procedures. It's just one night. Her father fell silent. You're sure? All I'll do is mop floors, change trash bags, and clean up. No one will notice. Think of it as training before I earn my white coat. That night, Leah slipped into the oversized uniform and tied the sleeves tight with a hairband. She walked to the bus stop, clutching the staff ID. Her heart pounded, not from fear of being caught, but because she was about to step into a world that didn't belong to her. Under her father's name, the main lobby of Althena General shone like a 5-star hotel. The air carried faint notes of peppermint oil, and sandalwood doctors in crisp white coats passed by like deities of modern medicine. Leah kept her head down and headed straight for the staff elevators. Ward 9, VIP Recovery Wing, clean rooms, 908, 920, 911, priority, silence. The supervisor's voice was flat, uninterested. He didn't even look at her face as he handed over the instructions. Yes, sir, she replied. As the elevator doors closed, Leah leaned back against the wall and drew a deep breath. What she didn't know was that, just a few steps ahead, a cruel misunderstanding awaited. And the hospital's director, the man in charge of the entire institution, would be the first to make her question if she even had the strength to keep chasing her dream. Leah pushed the cleaning cart out of the elevator onto the 9th floor, known as the VIP Recovery Wing. Here, patients weren't just treated, they were cared for, like royalty. Each room had recessed wooden doors overhead, lights calibrated to the patient's circadian rhythm and the scent of fresh flowers that changed with the time of day. She gripped the cart's handle tightly, her left hand still in a rubber glove. Under the warm overhead lights, the marbled white floor reflected the anxious face of a young woman wearing a uniform that didn't belong to her. Dangling from her chest was a name badge, Carlos Morin, swaying gently with every step. The first room 910 was her next task. Room 908 had already been cleaned. She checked the logbook quickly and rolled the cart to the end of the corridor. The door to room 9 and 10 was slightly ajar, and the curtain inside fluttered softly in the breeze from the air conditioning. She knocked twice per protocol. No response. Carefully, she pushed the door open. The room was empty. The bed was made, but a teacup sat half-finished on the side table, and the towel hadn't been replaced. Leah exhaled and stepped inside. She began her routine wiping surfaces, folding towels to exact horizontal and vertical proportions. As her gloved hand slid gently along the bed rail to disinfect it, a deep male voice spoke from behind her. "Didn't expect the hospital to change its guest services so dramatically today." Leah flinched. She turned around. A man stood at the door, tall, sharp. A charcoal gray suit draped over a powerful frame, his hair neatly trimmed with a touch of silver at the temples that only sharpened the icy depth in his eyes. His gaze swept over her quick and precise, like a surgical laser. "I don't recall requesting after-hours service," he said, his tone cold stern, almost mocking. Leah blinked in confusion. "I'm just here to clean. This room was scheduled for end-of-shift sanitation," she stammered. He raised an eyebrow. "I was under the impression Althena Hospital stopped offering this kind of service last year. Clearly they're updating their hospitality." "You're mistaken," she replied, voice trembling. "I'm not who you think. Your badge says Carlos." He stepped closer and pointed at the name pinned to her chest. "Are you impersonating hospital staff?" His voice was hard as granite. Leah instinctively stepped back, bumping into the bed frame. She raised her hand to cover the badge, eyes wide with panic. "I didn't mean to deceive anyone. My father works here. He was injured. I just wanted to help him keep his shift. I'm not taking money. I'm not enough." He cut her off sharply. "Do you realize this violates hospital safety and confidentiality protocols? You're unauthorized. You accessed a high-security ward. You impersonated staff. And you walked into my room." Leah froze. "Your room? I'm Dr. Adrian Calloway," he said, his voice steady. "Chief Executive Officer of Althena Hospital. And you've just stepped into the wrong world." Silence fell over the room like a heavy, cold shroud. Leah felt her back press into the wall. She didn't know what to say. Any attempt at explanation now would only sound like a reckless student playing make-believe in an adult's uniform. Dr. Calloway's gaze was no longer mocking. It was clinical, hardened, the look of a man who had seen too many lies and had no time left for one more excuse. "I'll be reporting this to HR, he said as he turned to leave. "Step out before I call security." Leah stood frozen. She lowered her head. Silent tears spilled beneath her mask. She left the rag behind and slowly pulled the cart back down the hallway, each step heavier than the last. The name badge swayed on her chest like a cruel reminder. She didn't belong here. Not in their eyes. The rain hadn't stopped. When Leah exited through the back door of Althena Hospital, her janitor uniform soaked and clinging to her skin like a foreign layer that didn't belong to her. She couldn't remember how long she stood in the elevator, how she walked back to the locker room, or whom she passed on the way. Everything was a blurry fog, a shattered dream, beneath the sharp gaze of a man she never thought she'd meet, much less. Be hurt by Adrian Calloway, the legendary hospital director revered by medical students as a symbol of success. She had once dreamed of greeting him in the hospital lobby under the title Resident Doctor. But tonight she had stood before him as an intruder, filthy, deceitful, unworthy. Leah stumbled toward a stone bench near the bus stop and collapsed onto it, hugging her backpack tightly to her chest. Rainwater mixed with tears, and she could no longer tell what was cold and what was warm. Only one phrase echoed in her mind. "You've just stepped into the wrong world." Those words were like a thin blade slicing deep into what she'd always tried to hide, that lingering feeling she wasn't good enough, that she didn't belong in the world of white coats and silent power. Meanwhile, on the 15th floor of the hospital in the executive office, Adrian Calloway stood at the glass window, watching rain lash against the helipad. In his hand was a cooling cup of coffee. Patient files lay open on his desk, the warm desk lamp casting a glow over charts from recent cardiac surgeries. But his mind was blank. He kept seeing her, the way she fumbled not with protest, but with quiet explanation, the way she bowed her head, hand covering the name badge that read, Carlos Moren. And most of all, the look in her eyes. There was no deceit, no manipulative smile, only fear, pain. Shame of someone who had just had their dignity stripped away by an accusation they didn't know how to fight. Adrian turned back to his desk and opened the hospital's internal HR system. He typed in the name, Carlos Moren, janitorial staff. Night shift, wolves, et assats. 15 years without violation. Residence District 3, low-income housing. Note, daughter is a medical student dependent. He reread the line again, slowly. Daughter is a medical student. He froze. That girl was Carlos's daughter. A medical student? Adrian sat still for a long moment, then reached over to access the hospital's security system. Pull up hallway camera footage, 9th floor, 8:30 p.m. to 9:10 p.m. The screen displayed the video, a young woman pushing a janitor cart down the corridor. Her posture was awkward, untrained, but she stopped at the right places, knocked exactly as instructed, and always maintained proper distance from patient beds. No suspicious behavior, no flirtatious glances, only caution, respect, and something unmistakably lonely. Adrian leaned back in his chair and rubbed his temple. What have I done? Throughout his career, he'd encountered too many people who schemed their way up, who traded truth for opportunity. So he built a habit, assume the worst, first trust later. But this time, he had reacted too fast, too harshly, and never gave her a chance. The next morning, Leah sat in front of the mirror in her small rented room. Dark circles shadowed her eyes. Her medical school uniform still hung untouched. Her clinical rotation would begin in 30 minutes, but she couldn't bring herself to stand. A bitter question formed in her chest. If one day I really do become a doctor at Althena, will they look at me differently, or will they still see a poor girl pretending to be someone else? She touched her chest where her father's badge, Carlos Moren, had once rested. Today she would go to class. She had to go. She didn't have the right to give up, not after everything her father had sacrificed to get her this far. Back in the director's office, Adrian had requested a full printout of the janitorial team's records and a list of all medical students who had rotated through Althena in the past 2 years. He needed her name not to punish her, but to make things right. I was wrong, he whispered. And this time, I won't let pride stop me from saying it. Riverside University Medical Library. 9:14 a.m. Leah sat in the back row of the lecture hall, separated from the rest of the class. She wasn't hiding, but today the spotlight of the classroom felt too harsh, exposing every crack in her already fragile spirit. The attending physician was discussing post-heart transplant complications, but Leah couldn't focus. The words on the slide blurred, replaced by last night's accusations. You're impersonating. You stepped into the wrong world. She wondered, did he still remember her face, or was she already filed away as just another protocol breach to be handled, then forgotten? But somewhere in the city, someone hadn't forgotten. Iftas A's Dean's office reception, 9:26 a.m. Dr. Adrian Calloway stood at the front desk, his expression serious but no longer cold. Today he wore a simple shirt, no tie, no name tag. He came not with a title, but with accountability. I'm looking for a final year med student. She interned at Althena last month. Her name is Leah Moren. Is she in class this morning? The secretary stared at him for a moment, then recognized him. Director Calloway. Not today. Adrian said softly, today. I'm just a man who made a mistake. Classroom 212, 3rd floor, 9:33 a.m. The professor had just finished explaining immunological mechanisms when the classroom door opened. Every student turned. The man in the doorway silenced the room. In an instant, Leah recognized him immediately. Dr. Calloway, no power suit, no icy stare. Just a man standing there, slightly awkward, holding a folder. The professor started to rise, but Adrian gently lifted a hand. Sorry for the interruption. I only need a minute. Leah froze. Every eye turned to her. Leah Morin, he said, gaze fixed on hers. I've been looking for you. No one breathed. Leah stood almost as if her body moved before her mind. He walked slowly toward her, stopping just a few rows away. His voice wasn't loud, but everyone nearby could hear it. I'm not here as the hospital director. I'm here as a man who misjudged someone and needs to apologize. Leah didn't speak, but her eyes shimmered glassy with held-back tears. I reviewed everything, he continued. The security footage, the records. I know why you were there. I know you weren't pretending. You stepped in for your father, a father who needed to keep his job, and you just wanted to help. She clutched the strap of her backpack. Half of her wanted to run. The other half had waited far too long for someone to believe in her. Leah, he said, calling her by name for the first time. You didn't step into the wrong world. That world was wrong for never having a place for you in the first place. No applause, no whispers. Only silence and a quiet respect spreading through the room like a ripple. Adrian stepped back. If you can forgive me, I'd like to take you to lunch, not to erase what happened, but to begin with real respect. Leah looked at him for a long moment. Then finally she nodded gently. I have a break at noon. On his way back to the office, Adrian received a message from her. I'm still angry, but I'm willing to listen. He smiled. It wasn't forgiveness yet, but it was a door. A door he had once slammed shut, now reopened by the very person he had once misjudged. 12:02 p.m. A small cafe nestled between two administrative buildings at Riverside University, known among students for its affordable prices and the way sunlight poured beautifully through its windows. No one would have expected someone like Dr. Adrian Calloway to sit here holding a paper coffee cup on a wobbly wooden chair, the golden light highlighting his salt and pepper hair. He checked his watch. 12:02. She had arrived. Leah appeared in the doorway, white coat draped over her arm, hair tied low, eyes tired but unwavering. Sorry, I'm late. The class ran longer than expected, she said. Expression unreadable. That's all right. Adrian stood pulling out a chair for her. Thank you for coming. She sat down silent for a while. When the server approached, she simply pointed to the water dispenser at the counter. I don't want anything expensive, she said. Not for appearances, I'm paying for myself. Adrian nodded. I understand. Onde was diz? Silence settled between them. Only the hum of a coffee grinder and the distant laughter of professors talking with students broke the quiet. When did you start looking for me? Leah asked calmly, her eyes still focused outside the window. That night, Adrian replied, the moment you left, alone, soaked, without saying a word. You weren't like anyone else who's ever walked into that room, and I knew immediately I'd made a mistake. Leah gripped her water glass. Why did you assume I was escorting someone? I was in a janitor's uniform, wearing my father's badge. I was cleaning the floor. Precisely because you did everything right, he said softly. I've become used to people entering that world looking to take something, so I put up walls. Assume the worst first, but this time it was the rightness that blinded me, and I paid for it, Leah said, looking him in the eye for the first time. You didn't just humiliate me, you made me question myself. I thought, maybe I really don't belong at a place like Althena. Adrian lowered his head. No defenses, no excuses. I'm sorry for making you carry that feeling home. Leah was quiet for a long moment. I used to believe that if one day I became a real doctor at Althena, I'd walk through that door with pride. But that night, I walked in under my father's name, and I was cast out like a fraud. Not because I did something wrong, but because I wasn't. Enough, Leah. Adrian interrupted gently, his eyes softening. You reminded me that honor isn't about the name sewn onto a white coat. It's about the reason you wear it. She didn't respond, but her eyes had thawed just slightly. Adrian reached into his pocket and took out a small envelope. Placing it on the table, he said, I'm not buying your forgiveness, but this belongs to you. Leah opened the envelope. Inside was a formal invitation, an offer for a special scholarship from the Althena Foundation, granted to medical students from underprivileged backgrounds with outstanding social contributions. Signed at the bottom was Adrian's own name. "I don't want privileges because you feel guilty," she said quietly. "Not out of guilt," Adrian replied. "Out of merit. You cared for that hospital like a true doctor, long before anyone gave you the title. What is your expertise?" She didn't say thank you, but she took the letter, and as she rose to leave, she paused, looked back at him one last time. "Next time you want to understand someone, don't look at the badge, I'm learning," that Adrian said. And for the first time she saw him smile, not with power, but with humanity. Monday, 7:02 a.m. Leah stood at the side entrance of Althena Hospital. This time she wasn't sneaking in. She wasn't wearing her father's name badge. She wore a white coat with her own name embroidered on it. Leah Morin, intern Dept of cardiology. Her hands trembled slightly, but her steps were steady. 7 days after meeting Dr. Adrian Calloway, she had received the official acceptance letter from Althena's prestigious internship program, no longer anonymous, no longer stepping back while others move forward. But as Leah walked into the third-floor hallway, the inpatient cardiology wing, she encountered a different kind of door that required no security badge to stay shut, judgmental stares. Ekisexteri. Eis estans edors, rebop by main door. "Hey, isn't that the girl who got kicked out of the VIP suite the other night?" A young nurse whispered. "Heard she got in thanks to the director's sponsorship. Figures." Fast-track types like her don't last long. Leah heard every word, not because they were loud, but because she had long since grown used to whispers, quieter than dignity. "Acid core stores. Airs. Nurse station, 7:30 a.m. Her supervising doctor, Dr. Mallory Keene, a woman in her 50s with elegant silver hair and eyes as sharp as a scalpel, looked Leah up and down. "We've been informed about your placement. Quite the surprise. A prestigious scholarship from a public university and a rather unique background. I hope that uniqueness doesn't make you think you're here to be treated differently," she added, not offering even the hint of a smile. Leah nodded. "I'm just here to learn and work, like everyone else." Spa first shift, 9:12 a.m. The patient was a 73-year-old man who had just undergone a stent procedure. Leah carefully checked his ECG, assessed skin tone and mucosa, and confirmed the last administered dosage. As the nurse struggled to resecure the IV line, Leah gently supported the patient's arm, holding it at the right angle to avoid vein rupture. "Where'd you learn to stabilize a vein like that?" the nurse asked. "I used to accompany my father on his night shifts in the ER since I was 17. Leah replied, "I'd watched the doctors and nurses, thousands of nights like that. From the perspective of a floor cleaner." Leah smiled. "And now someone who will clean blood if needed. Work doesn't discriminate between dirty hands or clean coats, as long as you know why you're standing there." Oh. That afternoon, staff break room. A nurse handed Leah a sandwich and a cup of water. "Here, I noticed you didn't eat breakfast." Leah looked at the middle-aged woman with her hair tied in a neat bun. "Thank you, I'm Hazel. I saw you that night getting kicked off the 9th floor. Leah froze slightly, her fingers tightening around the cup. "I used to be married to a janitor," Hazel continued. "I know what it feels like, not belonging. But I also know you've made it through." That Hazel sat beside her. "You don't need anyone to protect you. I've watched you. You work like someone who's lived the job, not just studied it." Leah smiled, not because of the praise, but because for the first time someone saw her effort, not just her appearance. Then loud that night, director's office. Adrian received a message. "No one kicked me out of a room today, and I didn't drop any IV bags. That's a good start, right?" He smiled, typed a few replies, deleted them, and finally sent. "No. That's proof you entered this world the right way, without shortcuts, without bowing your head." Thursday, 4:47 p.m. The entire 6th-floor cardiology inpatient wing was dimming under the golden light of sunset. Leah had just finished her 3rd shift of the week, squeezing in her final clinical notes before leaving the on-call room. But a soft beep from the central monitor feed made her stop mid-sentence. "Pax." She muttered, recognizing the abnormal, premature atrial contractions flashing on the screen. She stood immediately and double-checked the data. The patient in room 612, was George Laramie, 68 years old, a prominent businessman who had undergone bioprosthetic valve replacement surgery just 2 days ago. According to the morning note from the chief resident, he was in stable condition and under observation. Leah didn't think so. Room 612, 4:52 p.m. Mr. Laramie was struggling to breathe. His skin had begun to pale. A nurse was adjusting the IV medication, but hadn't noticed anything out of the ordinary. Hazel stopped the drip immediately. Leah said firmly, "I think he's reacting to the diuretics from this afternoon. He's about to go into arrhythmia." "Are you sure?" Hazel asked, alarmed. "If I'm wrong, we've only paused one dose. But if I'm right, we're saving a newly implanted heart valve." Hazel didn't hesitate. She stopped the medication. Leah wheeled the monitor closer, adjusted the IV lines, and hit the in-house emergency alert button. 4:57 p.m. A code blue echoed across the floor. A wave of doctors and residents rushed in, led by Dr. Adrian Calloway, who had been in a meeting upstairs. When the alert came through, Leah was already performing chest compressions. One of the doctors moved in to take over, but Leah spoke up without pausing. "I monitored him earlier. Packs were increasing. It's not hypoxia, it's drug accumulation. I suspect mild post-op myocarditis that went undetected." Adrian stood beside her, silent not because of the critical patient, but because of how Leah was standing at the center of the chaos. Calm, focused, and composed like a real doctor. "I need 100 mg of amiodarone. Get the defib ready?" Her voice didn't shake. The chief resident hesitated. "You're just an intern." Adrian stepped forward, voice like steel. "And I'm the one watching this patient still alive because of that intern." Silence orders were written. Defibrillator, prepped 5:04 p.m. The patient's heartbeat stabilized. 12 p.m. Emergency meeting. At the 15th floor conference room. Adrian sat at the head of the table, facing the department heads and clinical training supervisors. We just witnessed a near miss, and only one person noticed something was wrong. He held up the patient file. Her name is Leah Morin, and starting tomorrow, she will no longer be referred to as the scholarship intern. She will be a formal medical assistant training directly under my supervision. 8:80 p.m. Leah received a message from Adrian. "Thank you for saving a man's life and for reminding this hospital. Skill doesn't always come from the staff list." Leah stared at the screen, her heart full of unspoken emotions. She never needed them to acknowledge her. She just needed the chance to do what was right. And today, she had opened that door herself, not through connections, but through competence and courage. The next morning, 7:10 a.m. 6th floor, Althena Hospital. Leah returned to the hospital after a nearly sleepless night. Messages, calls, emails from classmates, professors, even people she'd never met, all centered around one thing: the intern who saved a billionaire's life. Some greeted her with admiration in their eyes. Others glanced sideways, their half-smiles tinged with skepticism. 2 weeks in and already got special treatment. Heard the director praised her himself. Must be some kind of connection. Leah stepped into the staff lounge trying to steady her breath. She didn't want attention. She just wanted to do her job well. But doing the right thing, especially in a system built on silence, always came with a cost. Director's office. At the same time, Adrian Calloway sat reviewing George Laramie's clinical report. Every metric showed improvement, and Leah Morin's name was marked as the first responder. But what made him pause wasn't her signature. It was the note from HR attached to the file. "We have received several concerns regarding unexplained favoritism in the promotion of intern." Morin Adrian sat still, eyes darkening. Not because of Leah, but because of the reflex response from the very environment he once called standard. When a young woman is recognized for merit, there's always someone looking for a reason beyond her ability. 11:50 a.m., hospital ground floor. Cafe. Adrian had texted Leah directly. No assistant, no formal invitation, just a simple message. "If you need air, there's an empty seat by the cafe window, no medical questions." Leah arrived at exactly 11. 50. Not early, not late. Her eyes still held shadows from the night shift, but there was no hesitation in her steps. "I thought you were busy running a hospital," she said as she sat down. I paused, Adrian replied, "to speak with the person who reminded me that sometimes a hospital needs to remember how to manage its own heart." She looked at him, not smiling, but no longer guarded. "They're saying, 'I'm your favorite student.' I've heard that too," Adrian said, calmly sipping his coffee. "And I wanted to ask if you really were my favorite. Would you defend yourself?" "No," she answered. "I don't need to. Let them talk. I'm here to learn and save lives, not to play a part in their story." He looked at her closely for the first time, not as someone he'd once misjudged, but as someone he was beginning to realize had never needed protecting, just not being obstructed. "Leah," Adrian said softly, "yesterday you did something most people don't, after 10 years of training. You spoke up. That's not instinct, that's trust in your intuition and courage." Leah looked out the window. A drizzle blurred the glass like floating dust. "I stayed silent for years," she said quietly, "because I thought I wasn't good enough to speak up. But if I hadn't spoken yesterday, Mr. Laramie might not have made it. Many see what's wrong, but not everyone speaks up. Because they're afraid of punishment," she added. "Or worse, being ignored." Adrian didn't respond immediately. He nodded slowly. "I've stayed silent in the past too, thinking that keeping quiet would preserve stability in the system. But you showed me. Sometimes a single truth can shatter what we call stability. And that's exactly what needs to happen." After a pause, Leah asked quietly, "Have you ever felt alone, even surrounded by the best minds?" He looked at her for a long time, until recently. "Yes." And in the quiet light of the cafe window, there was something neither of them said aloud. Two people, one who entered this world with the wrong badge, one who had forgotten how to trust, had found common ground, not through sudden emotion, but through quiet mutual respect. Tuesday, 3:17 p.m. ICU, Althena Hospital. Leah was reviewing post-op charts for a group of patients who had recently undergone bioprosthetic heart valve replacements. While compiling the data, she noticed something unusual. 3 patients all operated on by the same surgical team were showing early signs of myocarditis, a rare complication, but potentially fatal if left unchecked. Same surgical team, same valve model. Same supervising surgeon, Professor Arnold Cleven, Deputy Medical Director, A Living Monument at Althena. Fasivo, 42 p.m., Internal Medical Records Office. Leah stayed after her shift, combing through pharmacological reports and adverse device reactions. She discovered that the implanted valve was a trial model not yet approved by the FDA, used under internal clinical testing protocols, with explicit authorization from Professor Cleven. A faint note on one document read, "Off-label trial, approved for expedited recovery claims." Leah sat motionless, heart pounding. If the device wasn't officially cleared for use, then the patients had not been properly informed. This wasn't a mistake anymore. This was a breach of medical ethics. Next morning, 7:40 a.m. Training Advisor's Office. Leah met with Dr. Farah Wells, her internship advisor. She brought every document screenshot and cross-reference device, batch number. "I'm not here to create a scandal." Leah said, "I'm here because if I'm right, more patients may be at risk without even knowing it." Dr. Wells looked at her silently. "Do you know who you're accusing?" "I'm not accusing," Leah replied. "I'm asking for an investigation. And if it turns out to be a violation, no one should be exempt." Wandawada or 30 p.m., Emergency Internal Review, Board Meeting. Called a 4-member committee including Adrian Calloway, received a formal escalation from Dr. Wells. An intern has identified signs of regulatory breaches in a high-level surgical procedure last week. When Adrian saw the reporting name Leah Morin, he tightened his jaw. Not out of fear for her, but because he knew this storm was unlike any she'd faced before. Ausite Farms 10 p.m., closed-door conference room. 12 down, Gatis down 12th floor. Leah entered. 4 people were already seated. In the corner stood Professor Cleven, arms crossed. His face was unreadable, neither angry nor friendly, just a cold pride of someone who had held power far too long to be questioned by a student. Adrian gave Leah a subtle nod as if to say, "You're not alone, but you must speak for yourself." Leah began her presentation. Every fact was organized. Every report batch number and side effect sourced and cited. No tremble in her voice. No apology, only truth. When she finished, the room fell into a silence as heavy as lead. Das Jahresbeitrittsstage cost. Inna Professor Clevan responded with a faint smirk. "I've given 28 years to this institution, and a 2-month intern wants to lecture me on medical ethics." Adrian straightened in his chair. "We don't assess people by years, Sir Professor. We assess them by evidence and the lives of our patients." Leah met his gaze, not defiant, just resolute. "I don't think I'm above you, Professor, but I do know this. If someone like me could spot the risk, then someone with your experience could not have missed it, and choosing to ignore it. That's what made me speak up." Extasings. The meeting lasted another hour. In the end, the committee reached its decision. All valve surgeries using the test batch would be suspended. An independent internal investigation would be launched. Leah Morin's academic and ethical protections would be guaranteed throughout the process. N.O. That evening, message from Adrian. "You didn't just save patients, you saved us from complacency. They won't be comfortable, but they'll start to reflect." Leah sat by the window of her small apartment. Streetlight spilled in through the curtain. She didn't feel afraid, she felt right. And for the first time in her life, she realized strength doesn't come from being accepted. It comes from standing tall, even when the world wants you to bow. Afternoon, Althena, hospital auditorium, lobby, soft sunlight filtered through the towering glass panels. On stage, the hospital's logo glowed gently in golden light. White coats were ceremonially draped over the shoulders of each graduating medical student in the honor class. Leah Morin sat in the last row. No flashy makeup, no family in attendance, only a steady gaze and a tightly gripped invitation folded into quarters in her hand. Dr. Adrian Calloway stepped onto the stage. No luxury microphone, no triumphant background music, just a calm, familiar voice with quiet strength. Today we graduate a class of exceptional students, individuals who will become healers, who will carry the Hippocratic Oath into the real world. But before we begin recognizing academic achievements, I'd like to speak about something far more important than grades. The hall fell silent, pin drop, still. 1 year ago, an anonymous intern walked into Althena under her father's name badge, not to deceive, but out of love. No doors were open for her. No hands guided her through the halls of power. And when she was humiliated, she didn't cry out. She wiped her tears, then returned to prove she belonged. Leah lowered her head. The entire room turned to look at her. She didn't just save a patient in cardiac arrest. She saved an entire hospital from the habit of accepting wrong simply because it came from someone familiar. And to me, that is the truest definition of a doctor. Os in de bonsta. Adrian turned, took a commemorative plaque, and spoke each word clearly. "It is my honor to invite to the stage Dr. Leah Morin Honor, graduate recipient of the Althena Award 2026 for outstanding contribution to medical ethics, truth, and humanity." Applause erupted, not polite applause, but the kind of applause that seeks redemption, that expresses gratitude, that admits it had once been blind. Leah walked up to the stage slowly, deliberately, not with her head bowed, not with a stiffened spine, but with the calm of someone who knew. She hadn't changed to be accepted. She was accepted because she hadn't changed. Adrian handed her the plaque. In the moment their hands met, no words were needed. But Leah whispered softly, only loud enough for him to hear, "Thank you for not protecting me like someone fragile, but lifting me up like someone equal." Adrian gave a quiet smile, pride radiating in his eyes. "Thank you for reminding me that the greatest changes don't always come from the top, but from one ordinary person brave enough to say what no one else will." And 2 months later, Leah began working at the East Community Hospital Emergency Department, the place she had grown up near, not for prestige, but because in every patient there she saw herself. The struggling mother waiting through a stormy night, the skinny child arriving late because there was no bus. The people no one noticed, she commuted by bus, packed her own lunch. And during every shift, she asked herself, if they have no insurance, will I still save them? If they can't read, will I still explain it to them? If no one sees them, will I be the first to look? Ex no one de door. Adrian remained the director of Althena, but every month without fail, he visited the clinic Leah ran. Not to supervise, to relearn the things he had once forgotten. One day as they watched a newborn child cradled in Leah's arms, delivered in that tiny rural clinic, Adrian asked quietly, if you hadn't walked into the presidential suite by mistake, how different would everything be? Leah looked at him, her gaze quiet as twilight. I didn't walk into the wrong room. That door was misaligned, but I walked exactly where I was meant to. Oh, what's the story of Leah? Moran is not a fairy tale, no magic spells, no enchanted mirrors, just a young woman who dared to rise after being humiliated, misunderstood, and scrutinized, a woman who chose to do right, even when she stood alone, and in doing so, she shook the foundations of a system that thought itself untouchable.
Thank you for listening to The Whole Story. Stories Across Time is a place where timeless stories are retold with emotion, compassion, and the power of belief. Each video not only touches your heart, but also helps you see life through a deeper, more reflective lens. If you love heartwarming, inspiring, and soul-healing stories, hit subscribe and join us on a journey to discover life's most meaningful messages. Subscribe to Stories Across Time today, where every story matters.